Today, as one of our panelists, we have Sridhar Potaraju garu. Sir, please, can you switch on your video? Sridhar Potaraju garu is a senior advocate of Supreme Court of India with a long experience in the judicial field. Today, we are going to launch his book, Maxims from Mahabharata. This book, Sridhar Potaraju garu compiled from Mahabharata. He collected various sukta or subhashita like shlokas from Mahabharata. We have a very big tradition of subhashitas and suktas, suktis in India, in Indian literature. Recently, we participated in the launch of another book of Maxims by Professor Krishnamurthy garu, a mathematics professor from the Birla Institute. But that was a compilation from multiple sources. It was not specialized in Mahabharata. Sridhar Potaraju garu's book is specially focused on Mahabharata. He has collected wonderful Sukti shlokas or Subhashita shlokas. As it is well known, the system of Suktis or Subhashitas can be compared to Proverbs. Both Proverbs and the Suktis are not a scientific knowledge system. It is a collection of wisdom. Sometimes one shloka may appear contradicting to the other shloka. But it is a cream that has been skimmed off a long experience of life. Sridhar Potaraju garu shared with us that his experience in courts made him think that usually it is the Latin phrases that are quoted in courts repeatedly, and Sanskrit expressions usually don't come in. Occasionally, some judges, some advocates do bring in such shlokas, but provided if somebody compiles these kind of resources, that might help the legal practitioners like advocates and judges to at least be enlightened about how much such material is available in our literature. Sridhar Potaraju garu, I request him now to speak a few words about his experience in working for this book and his objectives in bringing out this book. Sridhar Potaraju.
Namaskaram. I'm grateful to Indica to give me this platform to launch the book, which I've named as Maxims from Mahabharata. As the name suggests, we always had the maxims coming from Latin, brooms, maxims, etc., that we use in a legal profession in courts of law. But we, as a living civilization which is timeless, have accumulated a lot of wisdom over centuries, which is not being utilized, I think, to the fullest extent is what I felt. Can I request Meg Garu to just screen share the book, please?
Sure. Kotiji, could you please share the book? Thank you.
So this is how the book has been conceived by Notion Press. They've designed it, and I need to acknowledge them along with Indica for making this possible. While speaking about the idea or the thought behind the book, I probably sometime in 2018, in the process of introspection, I realized that there is a lot of wisdom which is available in Indian languages, more so in Sanskrit. That wisdom is available with most of the people who are rooted with their culture and heritage, and definitely not available or not accessible to people who've been successfully colonized by Macaulay's education system. So my generation probably were the last of those generations which survived the Macaulayan efforts to actually erase the memory of our culture and civilizational heritage. Though we were educated in the English pattern of education, which compartmentalizes all subjects, and then there is no link between one subject or the other, which makes us become specialists without understanding the consequences on the other subjects that we are not exposed to. So it is in this context that I started feeling that we have to be having some kind of literature which is useful for everyone in guiding ourselves in our life. Because ultimately the purpose of our itihasas, which are a part of our heritage, is to bring us out in life along with the characters that we now worship as gods, be it Ramayana or Mahabharata. For me, I believe they were humans who lived on this land and shared their experiences through these itihasas by the authors, where their lived experiences in adversities were actually the testing times when their real characters were revealed. They did not budge, they did not concede space and then compromise. So those people who chose not to compromise become our heroes, and then we have also deified them and then made them as gods. Rama in Valmiki Ramayana is a character which goes through all human emotions, what one would conceive or one would go through living a normal life even now in 20th century. So those experiences are beautifully recorded in Valmiki Ramayana. Similarly, in Vyasa Mahabharata, we have the protagonists, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, going through conflicts and layers of conflicts. So in the process, a lot of anecdotal narratives come about which deal with various aspects. Like if you can see the contents on the screen, it can be broadly classified as dharma. What is dharma? How it is to be adhered? What is the consequence? What is truth? What are the principles governing punishment? I mean, it's very easy. In criminal jurisprudence, there was a recent debate as to whether a death sentence should have been or should not have been commuted in the case of a person who was found guilty of murdering after raping a 4-year-old child. So the principles governing punishment were also part of our itihasas. Of course, we cannot be separated from the karma philosophy, which is law of physics, which is cause and effect. Whatever action you do will be met with a consequence. So then hygiene as a good conduct. Now, most of us actually were resisting and then also trivializing certain practices until the global pandemic has made us relook at our hygiene aspects of our lifestyles. I remember, like in my own family, we were not allowed to enter, especially in my grandmother's house, to enter the house with your shoes on. We had to wash our feet outside. We couldn't enter. In our house also, there are certain areas where we don't use footwear. So these are the things which actually taught us about hygiene. And then these practices were then mocked and treated as superstitions, and then we've actually discarded them until the pandemic reminded us about their real values. My experience in this space is that most often than not, what we have done is that we've lost the reasons behind certain practices, and the loss of reason has resulted in not valuing those practices and then actually mocking them along with the others who would look down upon us as being people who need to be civilized. So that kind of a outlook has actually reflected in our own approach to our own culture, heritage, itihasas, and places of worship in all spheres of our life. And then ratification from the West or the white man has become the yardstick in almost all spheres of our life. In the last few years, we've reached a stage where probably it's time that we relook at this approach of aping, literally like apes, whatever the West gave us, without questioning it, without discussing it, the pros and cons, and then more crucially, understanding it's relevant in our culture and our civilization. As most of us would know, the civilizational history of India is much older than the West. The Americans actually are European migrants who decimated the locals. So is the case in Australia and New Zealand. In Europe also, there have been a lot of turmoil, and their civilization is also not as nascent when we are talking about the contemporary continuing living civilizations. I'm not talking about the civilizations which were extinct by religious or other invasions. Whereas India has survived all invasions, be it the Islamic invasions to begin with, or the European invasions subsequently, which tried to colonize and justify the colonization by trying to reason out saying that we needed to be civilized. Now that subsequently has been completely followed up by socialist and communist ideologies which have taken over our intellectual space. Though they actually speak about tolerance, free speech, etc., but if you actually test them, it's skin deep. When you question certain core values or core ideas, the intolerance is there to be seen on your face. On the contrary, our approach has always been a Vada Prativada scheme of affairs where people used to indulge in intellectual debates, and through intellectual debates, they would actually unearth or pursue what we all are looking for, the truth. The pursuit for truth in our civilization is a continuing exercise, and it continues as we speak, because there's no end to it until we reveal to ourselves as an individual Atma what the ultimate truth is. This is understood in the concept of, or the Chaturveda Purusharthas that we actually are aspired to or we are ordained to pursue in our life. No other way of life would actually encourage a person to indulge in desires that probably the Bharatiya Sanskriti permits. It encourages one to acquire wealth, which is also without any guilt. But both of them are actually guided by dharma and moksha as the beginning and the end goals. Dharma is the companion which has to be a part of your exercise of pursuing your acquisition of wealth, be it wealth of knowledge or material resources, or fulfilling your karma or desires. So in the absence of dharma, pursuit of artha or kama would actually become materialistic, which is classically what probably the Western world actually encourages people to do, minus the dharma aspect, which governs the manner in which you indulge in these two things. And then we have the four ashramas of life, starting with brahmacharya, grihastha, then vanaprastha, then sannyasa. It beautifully sets out what is to be done at what stage of your life. So it's a very holistic guiding principles that we have been actually endowed with for centuries. But unfortunately, probably due to the enamored life of the Western materialism, that we've lost the values that which were part of our own cultural heritage. In this book, my attempt was to actually broadly categorize them. If you can just hold this chakra. This has been designed by Pranati Potaraju, a second year student from Ujjain, Avantika University in design. We have dharma, truth, punishment, karma, good conduct, nature, faith, anger, reputation, eternal values, mental health, and power of words. which symbolize all aspects of our existence, be it your spiritual journey, be it your social journey involving relationship with your own family members, society, or other species in the nature, or we are also dealing with the political and other aspects of our life. Because as a nation state, we have our territorial boundaries which need to be protected. We cannot be sans those protection through our armed forces and other mechanisms which are required to protect the state. For the people of the country to actually pursue their dharma, artha, kama, moksha in a manner which is in conformity with the purpose of life which each individual is actually embodied with. It is a journey where everyone is required to look within. This is not a journey of probably preaching to others. It's an introspective journey. That is what probably these itihasas have actually given us. My attempt through this book was to bring to the present times the immense wealth of knowledge. My personal experience was when I was reading it, I started reading Valmiki Ramayana and Mahabharata to fill in a vacuum due to loss of my father around 2011. So once I started reading it, I started making notes. And in the process, I actually realized there's so much of wealth of knowledge which actually helped me overcome my own grief. And it also helped me as a lawyer, because after putting in 20 years plus of practice, I realized that I needed to educate myself to probably become more contemporarily relevant and then may add value to my experience, because there's a continuing learning process. And I found that Ramayana and Mahabharata were the places to look for to get the jurisprudential and philosophical depth. Without that depth in our understanding, interpretation of law or application of law dispassionately may not be possible. It is in this context that I started looking for Indian maxims so that it will be a quick shot to refer to things. And thanks to social media, we have access to so many good morning messages which we receive from well-wishers with nice, beautiful anecdotes. But along with them, we get a lot of things which are attributed to certain sources, but no one has any way to verify those sources. So it is there that I realized that it is time that we compose these beautiful pearls of wisdom into a compilation. And then I did my own bit of giving the Bhavartha or the English translation for those slokas. These slokas actually have epitomized various aspects of life, and then they have also given us an insight as to how life ought to be lived and what are the consequences of failing to perform their own dharma. We are a dharma based society, so therefore adhering to individual dharma is the utmost duty of every individual, as against a Western concept of a state versus citizen, where the citizen is always at loggerheads with the state, is always encouraged to assert his individual rights against the community interests. And we have reached a stage where the individual rights are raised to a pedestal where the society is made to suffer the consequences of these idiosyncrasies passed off as individual freedoms. As a society, we cannot have peaceful coexistence in the absence of a certain order, a social order, a public order, where everyone is bound by certain regulation as far as their behavior is concerned. It is in this space that one needs to understand what will be the guidelines that one can follow, which are not religious in nature. Unfortunately, the Machiavellian education approach and the followed by the socialist communist outlook which has been injected into our minds makes us think that the Hindu way of life is pedantic, ritualistic, and it only promotes archaic superstitions and has no value. So therefore today to even speak about reading Ramayana or Mahabharata, most of the people are actually not very comfortable. They would rather not speak about it or not acknowledge it, but they would indulge it in personal space as a matter of their own personal growth. Now, what is it that makes us feel inferior to acknowledge or read any of these things is what really bothered me. Is there anything that needs to be shied away from, or is there anything that we should be ashamed of? I actually, having read both Valmiki Ramayana and Mahabharata, have come out with much more conviction that we should be proud of our heritage. These are the epics which talk about people and their eccentricities in its worst form, be it in Valmiki Ramayana, the desire of Surpanaka to have Rama, or the kind of indoctrination that Mandara does to Kaikeyi brings out the worst in a human form, which we see even contemporary lives. Now, how did people live and deal with these situations? And how did they regret for having acted upon the indoctrination or the consequences of unguided karma of Surpanaka led to the fall of Ravana? So these are the things which were discussed, and then nothing was hidden. It is open for debate. Even now, people debate on the pros and cons of Ramayana anecdotes. Similarly, when we take Mahabharata, the most critiques actually talk about Draupadi. But that is a social reality even till date. So we do not deny the reality of life, but we need to learn from how that society dealt with it, and how Bhishma, having failed in his duty or to perform his dharma, has suffered the consequence of being on a bed of arrows, so that his entire suffering, he actually reflects on his own failings while teaching Yudhishthira about various aspects of learning. Now, Anushasana Parva, Shanti Parva, Vana Parva are the classic parts of Mahabharata, which I would strongly recommend for anyone who's actually going through grief or mental health challenges. So is Sundarakanda. I mean, I actually kept hearing about Sundarakanda being very useful for people when they are going through tough times. I always wondered, and I was always a Charvaka in the sense I would question everything. I would question why should we do any particular thing, and then try to understand the reasons behind it. Where I did not find answers, I had the opportunity of talking to great learned persons like Sri K. Parasaran Garu or Sri Narsimha Garu, my senior and mentor. And I would get answers from them, or they would refer me to or provoke me to read further and guide me to the right kind of literature. So that triggered the entire experience. Now, coming back to my Maxims, this book is for everyone. I would say this is more for children, teachers, because we need to reinvent ourselves through our own values, which is natural for us. We cannot go on with a peaceful, harmonious life in the absence of a balanced life where we can actually deal with our sattva gunas, rajo gunas, and tamasic gunas, and appropriately balance them and know which one needs to be actually put forefront. It's like your batting order. I mean, as a captain of the team, we need to know which one needs to be promoted up and which one needs to be put back. We can't use sattva guna when China is trying to encroach on our land. There it is rajas. But when you are actually dealing with internal decisions in a democratic process, it's the sattvic guna which needs to come forth, try to rationalize and reason people. That's the essence, and tamoguna is indispensable in every one of us, and we would have to balance it and then channelize those things in a manner which is in conformity with the social conduct and behavior, which gives everyone a space to live in harmony. When I speak of everyone, our way of life includes all species in the nature. We are not, as the West would call, as the masters of the nature. We are a part of the nature, and our existence is dependent on the nature, which includes flora, fauna, animals, birds, everything. And all of them are actually, in the scheme of karma philosophy, could be attaining a human life depending on how they live and what they perform. So if we don't believe in this concept of rebirth, it helps us in rationalizing our conduct, and also rationalizing our behavior for our own selves, our society, and also our creator, which brings in peace of mind, which is the most crucial thing which is required in the modern times. I really have to acknowledge C.K. Parasran Garu, who's actually guided me while composing this book painstakingly at the age of 94, read the draft, made suggestions. I would also like to acknowledge Sri Narasimha Garu, my mentor, who's been there always to guide me and encourage me and make this book a reality. I would like to acknowledge my mother, Srimati Ratnavali Daliparthi, a working woman who actually ensured that we learned all skills while at home, so that Corona really didn't make us feel lost. We were trained in housekeeping as boys, along with my sister. We were not discriminated. And this is something which comes naturally because of our grounding in our cultural heritage, that girl and boy are the same. I mean, as far as treatment and opportunities are concerned, they have their biological roles, they have their social roles in terms of the society. And they were trained to meet their objects at the same time, not depriving anyone of their academic opportunities or professional opportunities. I would also like to thank my colleagues, Ankita, Vishnu, who helped me in composing this Maxims. We started it on 28th March 2020 when the lockdown was announced. So every day we used to sit for 2.5 hours and then compile the Maxims in English. Then I got in touch with Sanita Jani of eLingua Hub. She actually helped me compose the Sanskrit slokas. Thereafter, my own office staff, Ritu Kohli, Sunil Tiwari, Dharmender, who actually made the entire exercise possible. So several others have actually helped me with the composition. My brother, who's guided me, he encouraged me to put the Sanskrit slokas, without which this book would have looked a little vague. Sri Dalip Singh, who encouraged me to write the primer or the context of each sloka, so that we know the context in which some maxim has been brought out. I would like to thank each and everyone who's been part of this journey and who's been there with me. My dear friend Balaji, who was always there as a sounding board with his experience in print, and he kept guiding me, and I can only acknowledge everyone by a way of a folded hand namaskaram for their contribution in this book. Last but not the least, Sri Harikaran Bhatlamani Garu, who had faith in this work and then offered to get this book published and also the platform to launch it. I really owe it to all of you, and thank you very much.
Namaste, Sridhar Garu. This is a great opportunity for Indica also to be associated with you. There are questions from the participants, mostly about where to buy this book and how to buy this book.
Sir, this book is now available on notionpress.com website, and it is also available globally on Amazon, Flipkart. It's both available in the printed format as well as also on the Kindle or the digital format in multiple platforms. So it's easily available. It is not available in bookstores as of yet. As of now, we're looking at that. And but Amazon is available in US, Australia, Europe, and even in Southeast Asia. And in India, notionpress.com, the publishers are directly available online, and you can place orders. And people who would like to place bulk orders may have to approach notionpress.com, as they are the people who will be able to provide larger volume of books, because Amazon and other platforms have limitations on the number of copies per order.